Hi, this is Jesper Sandell from Velocitypeak.com, and in today's Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this type of animation. Let me rewind that. So it's this kind of springy, bubbly text reveal. And we are going to focus on, specifically today, we're going to focus on this now section. And if you want to follow along, all the project files are available on velocitypeak.com. Let's get to it. Okay, so let's put this together. And we're going to start with a plane, and we're going to add displacement to that plane. And then we're going to add the text after that. So let's start with adding a plane. A plane. And because we have a 16 by 9 widescreen crop, I'm going to make this 650 by 400. And because we're going to use displacement, we need a lot more geometry. So let's look at the geometry we have now. So Garud shading lines. So this is not enough geometry by a long shot, at least not if you're going to do fine details. I'm going to increase the width segments to 300 and the height segments to 200. And if I zoom in, you can see that we're creating little squares. And that's important when you create displacement. You want to make sure that the width and the height displace evenly. So squares is the ideal then. Now, this isn't actually enough. I'm going to add more geometry, but I'm going to do it by adding it to a subdivision surface. So hold down Alt or Option and then click on the subdivision surface. And you can see how dense this mesh got now. It's almost black. So we don't need to see the geometry anymore. I'm going to turn it off. So Display, Garud, Shading. And I'm just going to call this SDS Plane. And I'm going to add the displacer to the subdivision surface. So I want to put this inside of a null. So let's go and add a null to the scene. And I'm going to call null displaced plane. And then I'm going to take the subdivision surface. Let's twirl that up and just put that inside of the null. And then add a displacer. And let's make sure that that is a child of the null. Perfect. Now we don't see anything yet because we need some sort of a grayscale map to drive this. So in the settings, we have the type is intensity centered, which means that it's going to displace upwards and downwards, which is what I want. But I want to increase the height, so set this to 50. And then let's go into the shading tab and let's add a noise. So shader and then noise. And now we have some sort of result. So let's go into the noise and let's tweak this a little bit. I love working with Cinema 4D noises. There's so many things you can do. It's so flexible. It's just a fantastic tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the noise type. Instead of a standard noise, I'm going to use this one, gaseous. And I'm also going to change, say, the octaves here. This is how much complexity the noise has. Right now it's 5. I'm going to reduce that to 2. So it's a little less granular. I'm also going to change the space. Instead of texture, I want to map this flat, so a UV 2D. So now we have a little bit more manageable noise situation. So then I'm going to go down here to where it says cycles. We can actually run several cycles of the same noise here. So I'm going to set this to 5. And now we have a very different type of result. You can actually create some pretty interesting results by just playing with this cycle. Say 20, you can have very different result. And now it's displaced a little too tall, but you can do some pretty cool stuff with this. But I'm going to leave it at 5, experiment with that. And then I'm going to adjust the contrast here. So we have low clip, the high clip, brightness, and contrast. And they control the grayscale values of this noise. Now, I know from my testing that I want to bring up the low clip, the blacks a little bit, so closer to 50, something like that. And then just take down the high clip a little bit, increase the contrast. I'm going to leave brightness as it is, increase contrast just a little bit. And obviously I tweaked these things before, otherwise you have to go back and forth. But now we have this kind of interesting pattern. And so that's the start of the noise setup. So let's go ahead and add the text on top of this. So let's temporarily hide this. So click on the stopwatch. And let's add a text spline and text. And I want to put it on the XZ plane so it matches our plane. And the text I'm going to put in is now. And the font that I used was a Futura. I mean, obviously put in whatever font you want and you have. But I'm going to use this one, Futura PT Bold. And I want to put the alignment to be in the middle. And let's just space this out a little bit. So say 10. I think that's pretty good. So that's the setup for the text. Now let's unhide the displacement plane. And the way we're going to have this work is we're going to go into the displacer and we're going to use the falloff. And in the falloff, we're going to put in the text spline. And something happened there. If I click on the text spline, I want to change a few things here. The spline shaped curve, I want to keep that. But the distance mode, I'm going to change to radius. So now we actually have the beginning of the effect. Now, let me zoom in here a little bit. I want to increase the radius. So I'm going to set this up to 30. So now it's obviously way too intense. But what we can do now is that we can take the text spline and simply move it up away from the plane. So you could basically have the text animate on or off just this way if you wanted to. But I'm going to put it, go to coordinates tab, put it, say 28. And I also want to move it down a little bit so it's in the middle of the plane. So I think that's pretty good. And I actually don't need the text spline anymore. I can just temporarily hide it. I can't turn it off because I need it active, but I can just hide it from view. And let's see what we have. So it's looking good. The only thing I want to do here is I want to add a little bit of smoothing. You can see that if I zoom in, we have some jaggedness here. So let's add a smoothing deformer to this. So deformers, and then let's add smoothing. There you are. And then put that as a child underneath this displacer. And zoom out a little bit. In the smoothing, I may increase this to say 40. We still have a little bit of jaggedness there. I think we can get away with that. If you want to make it even smoother, you can decrease the stiffness. But you can also just simply increase in the subdivision surface. You can add more subdivisions. I'm not going to do that because it gets slower to work with, but you can certainly do that for render to have a smoother result. But I'm going to leave as is for now. So let's see. So this is what we have now. So how are we going to reveal the text? You can obviously do that many different ways. But the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go into the displacer. And then in the falloff, I'm going to add a shader field. And it probably got added already. See the shader field. And so we have a shader field. Right now, the blending mode is set to max. I want to change that to min. And now it disappeared. We need to add a noise to this. So with the shader field active, I'm going to go into the field and the shading options here. And then I'm going to click on noise. And now the text came back. Let's go into the noise and change some of these settings. Now, I'm actually going to flip the color to make the top one white. Okay, and then, actually, that's not white. This is white. And then the bottom one, I'm just going to make black. And then let's change the noise type. And this time, I'm going to use something called Naki, which is one of my absolute favorite noises. I'm going to increase the complexity in the noise. So I'm going to increase the octaves from 5 to 10. And then again, I'm going to change the space. Instead of texture, I'm going to map this flat on the UV2D plane. And I will increase the scale, but let's do the contrast adjustments first. So the way we reveal the text or hide or reveal the text is by adjusting the brightness of this in some capacity. So for example, if I take this brightness slider and I drag it this way, you can see that the text disappears, and then we could bring it on. But if we bring it on like this, it'll be more like little dots that appear. If we increase the scale of the noise, which I will do, to 1800, now we're going to have more bigger sweeping adjustments. So you can see now bigger chunks get revealed at a time. So I've been playing with this, so I know the values that I am going for. And I know that I want to have this completely revealed on frame 75. So let's go to frame 75. And then I'm going to type in a few values here. So I'm going to set the low clip to 48. And then high clip at 100. Brightness, I'm going to bring down the brightness to 16. I'm going to increase the contrast to around 30. And then I'm going to keyframe the low clip, the high clip, and the brightness. And then I want to start the animation on frame 20. So let's go to frame 20. And then let's change the low clip here. I'm going to go all the way down to 0 and keyframe that. I'm going to bring down the high clip to 50. You can see things are happening. Almost gone the text now. So 50, 49 works too. And then brightness, I'm going to bring up to around 40. Okay, so now the text is gone. I'm going to keyframe that. So if we play this back now, it's a little slow. We can actually reduce the subdivisions. Now we have 2. Let's set it to 1. It's going to play back significantly quicker. Let's play that back. And then the text is being revealed. And that's it. And the way I'm going to hide the text later on is to simply use just a solid. Let me show you. So in the displacer, I'm going to add a solid. And then because the solid is set to max, we get the full effect back. But I want to change that to subtract. So now we can simply animate this on or off by controlling the value here. So if I bring this down, the text comes back. So I'm going to start at a value of 0, and on frame 140, let's go to 140, and let's set a keyframe. And I'm going to have this animate over 25 frames. So on 165, let's bring this up a little bit. It's a little goes a long way here. Let's see, a little bit more, a little bit more. Let's do 10 to be on the safe side. 10. So now if we play this back, we have on frame 20, the animation is starting. And then now the text is fully revealed. And it stays on for a little bit. And on frame 140, it's going to start disappearing. And there you go. Now, when the text is animated on, it's a little boring. So to get the bubbly effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add if I go into these options under the clamp here, I'm going to add a delay. So just like the delay effector in the MoGraph section, I'm going to put the delay effector on top of the shader field. And then right now the mode is set to smooth, but we want it to be a little springy, a little bubbly, a little jumpy. So let's set that to spring. And I'm going to leave it at 50%. So now when we play this back, we're going to have just a little bit of extra movement, which is going to add interest. It looks a little bit more fun. And yeah, that's it. That's the reveal of the text, and then we hide the text. Good. So the next step is to colorize this. And I'm going to show you how to render this with a physical renderer. In my example, and also in the download, there's a Cycles 4D version. But I'm going to show you how to do this with a physical renderer. So let me zoom in here on a frame where the text is fully revealed. And I also want to add more subdivisions back. So let's go to the subdivision plane, add it back to 2 for both the editor and renderer. It's going to give us more detail. Let's go in here. And actually, let's go a little further. Let's go to 120. And then let's add a material. So let's just double click in the materials manager, create a material, put that on the subdivision surface. I'm going to call this colors. And then I pull that window over. And let's start by working with the color. So I'm going to disable the reflectance channel, and I'm going to go into the color channel. So I'm going to add a gradient. Gradient. And let's go into the gradient. Something happened. Let's go into the gradient. And let's zoom out here a little bit. So the gradient that comes in now is a 2DU, so right to left, and it's cycles. Let's first turn off cycles. And then let's change the type from a 2DU to a 3D linear. So now, right now, the gradient is going from left to right, but we want it to go up and down. And that is controlled with these controls here, the start and the end. We can see that the first one, which is referring to x, is minus 100, and then the end is 100. So let's bring those back to 0. And then we want to control the y. I'm going to set minus 10 for the start and 10 for the end. And you can get a sense what's going on. If you look at this preview here, you can see that now we have it going from the bottom to the top. And to see this a little clearer, let me first right-click underneath this color bar and say interpolation of all knots. Set that to step. We pull this one out. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sandwich the black. So I'm going to make a copy, control, or command drag this to make a copy. And I can see we have a strip in the middle. So what we want to do is, if I zoom in here, we want to have the flat plane be white, and then we want to map some colors around that for wherever the text goes above the plane, we want to have some colors, and then wherever it goes below, we want to have some colors. So let's see. So we gotta have to play with this a little bit. So let me first stick the white plane and see where is the white. So the moment this turns white on the plane, we know that we have it correct. So okay, so that looks good. So we need to make sure that this color here is approximately in this position. You may have to go back and forth and tweak this a little bit because the delay effect that we're using might have it jump a little higher than you expected later on. But for now, this looks good. And then let's add a few more colors to this. So around here is the top. So coloring is obviously up to you. Let me twirl this down. So I'm going to use an orange here. Maybe a little bit more towards the red. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of purple pink. So let's get a pink purple color. And then this is all to taste, obviously. I want to bring in a lot of black at the bottom here. So if I Command drag this one and pull this white one over, you can see we can start introducing the colors at the bottom there. And zoom out here a little bit. So that looks pretty good. I want to have some color accents. So let's copy this one. I'm going to make this orange. And I want to flip these. Or maybe just have a tiny little fraction. Let me copy and put that so it's something like that. Maybe not. Put it maybe something like that. Let's see if we bring in some pink purple on that too. Maybe. Well, this is all to taste. Let's see. If we zoom out. So it looks okay. Let me see if I bring some black over there as well. And then maybe expand this a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna call this okay. We won't know exactly what it looks like before we add some lighting to this as well. But let's start with that, and let's add just a little bit of lighting to this. So let's close this. And the first thing I'm gonna do, because I wanna have some reflections. So let me add a sky to this. And I am going to add just an HDRI from the content browser that ships with Cinema 4D. And let's see, the one I'm going to use. I'm just going to use this Photo Studio. I have this pulled up, but you can go to the magnifying glass here and you can search for HDRI, and then you're going to find these. So I'm going to use the Photo Studio. So if I just double click that, it pops up here in the Materials Manager. Let me go back to the Object Manager, and I'm going to put the Photo Studio on top of the sky. We don't see any difference yet, but we will once we enable the reflectance on the material. And then I'm also going to light this. So let me frame this the way I want and get in a camera. Let me bring in a camera, and the camera is going to be more of a longer lens, so an 80mm, which is going to flatten things out a little bit. And then if I enable that one, you can see that it's zoomed in. We can see that it's a little flatter. So I'm going to put this approximately head on in the center. And I just want to have a hint of an angle. Not too much. I just want to have a little bit of an angle just so we exaggerate the bubbliness, if you can call it that. And perhaps something like that. I think that's pretty good. And I want to make sure I don't accidentally move the camera. So I'm going to right click on the camera, and I'm going to go to rigging tags, and Cinema 4D R21. It's under rigging tags. And oops, and didn't go well. All right, let's do protection tag. So now it's going to be, I can't move it accidentally. Okay, so let's add a light to this. So I'm going to go to the lights menu, and I'm going to use probably my favorite light is to use a target light. And the target light is simply a standard light that has a target object. And this is the light target. And it comes in right in the middle of the scene, right on top of our text, so it's perfect. But now the light, I want to change this. Instead of a spotlight, I'm going to change this to be an area light, which is my favorite light. And just reduce the intensity to, say, 90. And I'm going to enable the interactive render region. But to work more efficiently with that, I'm going to change the rendering, the renderer. So I'll go to the rendering options. And then instead of a standard renderer, I'm going to set it to be physical. And then under the physical options, I'm going to set the sampler to fixed low. I can, in fact, just bring this down to 1. Lower all these to 1. So as we work, it's faster. And then we bring this up later on when we actually render this. So let's turn this off. Let's enable all the views. So if you hit F5 or click this button on the top right here in this window, we can see the perspective top right in front view. So I'm gonna just light this front lit. So it's gonna be fairly flat, the lighting. To actually see what's going on, let's make the perspective window active and then enable the interactive render region so we can see. It's gonna update. There you go. It's not the best quality, but it's enough for us to see this, and it's quicker with low quality. So we can see the camera here. So the light is around here, so it's almost head on, just at a slight angle. I'm not sure which angle. Let's try this. I think that's fine. I think that's pretty good. I don't want any kind of spectacular lighting. I want the colors to be the main story of this. So I'm gonna leave it at that and then go back to F1 or just click this button again. Now we are in top view. I want to click on the button here. So I think that's pretty good. Let's bring up the quality here so we can see a little bit better. So we need reflections because this is very, very flat in terms of colors. So let's go into the material and let me pull that over and let's enable reflectance. And it always comes in with a default specular. So let's first off delete that one, and I'm gonna add. Doesn't really matter, to be honest. The effect is going to be fairly similar between, say, a GGX or a Beckman. Let's just do Beckman, and it's going to be very reflective now. The first thing I want to do is the attenuation is set to average, but we want to set that to additive, so it takes the color channel into account. And I'm just going to bring up the roughness a little bit. The reflection is way too strong, but we're going to temper that by adding a Fresnel to this. So let's go down to Layer Fresnel, and instead of none, let's set this to dielectric. We have conductor, which is for all the metals. Dielectric is for everything else. And I'm going to use one of the presets, which is just a PET bottle to get that plasticky kind of feel. And then I'm going to reduce the reflection strength here a little bit to say around 70, something like that. This is all to taste, obviously. And then if you bring up the specular strength, you get more of a plastic shrink wrap almost. So this is really up to you what you want. I'm going to keep a little bit of specular, but I'm going to bring it fairly low. And then perhaps bring up the reflection strength a little bit. Let's see what that does. And I think that's okay. So let's do a test render with the settings a little higher for the renderer. So I'm going to turn this off. And then let's go to, we can disable the interactive render region. And let's go back to the renderer. And in the physical, under the physical options, I'm going to keep it at fixed, but I'm going to set up the sampling quality to high, and then the blurriness subdivisions, set it back to 2. This is a fairly uncomplicated scene. It's pretty easy to render this. It's going to be quite quick. And I don't need to save this. I just want to get a sample. But the output, I'm going to switch to 1920 by 1080. And I'm going to do the current frame. And let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to enable the not the interactive render region. I'm going to render to picture viewer. Okay, so we finished rendering. Let me try to maximize this so we can see. I have to zoom out. No, you can see this pretty well. Try to put this in the center. Okay, so this is the final result. And now if you want, you can go back to the subdivision surface and perhaps increase the subdivision levels to say 3. You may want to go back. If you do that, you may want to go back and tweak the colors because they're going to change depending on the amount of geometry you have. But that's essentially it. And that brings us to an end to this tutorial. And you can download the project files on velocitypeak.com and a lot of other project files for that matter. So thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.